Rachel here. Welcome to my Slow TV Stitchery. Well, good morning everybody. I think I'm quite pleased with how the background for my fishy has turned out. And now I have a few quandaries. Generally speaking, fish heads have a different scale pattern to the tails, or to the body and the tail. And I'm wondering, this is almost a top view, and I'm wondering whether to put some sort of indication of the dorsal fin now, or do something vaguely scaly, heaven knows what, and fill in later. And I think I might fill in later. So we'll start with the body, and we'll do now then, there is a variant on, I think it might be called Moorish stitch. Let's see how that goes. It's a variant on the sort of mosaic stitch, and it's a condensed stitch. So we'll see how this goes. This is of course a bit of an adventure. And it may be that using 9 threads, as I have done for the straight stitches, is too many for diagonal stitches. But we'll see how we go. Of course, there'll have to be a little bit of compensation stitching to create the right sort of curves. But this is very much a first experiment, and while I'd like it to be a piece that can stand alone, that somebody might actually like to look at, if it does what I want it to do, I'm already winning, if you follow me. I had a nice time last week reading the first account of an archaeological dig looking for the Norsemen in Newfoundland, Very interesting it was too. And both written and translated by people who had a sense of the language, which is nice. I have always tended to have something of a preference for something which is written by someone who doesn't mind sounding as enthusiastic as they presumably are. Apart from anything else, they tell you different things to the people who are very wound up in the scholarliness of it all. But I've moved back to the Anglo-Saxons, or at least the West Saxons, and Max Adams on Alfred's Britain. I seem to have settled on having one fiction and one non-fiction going at once at the moment, rather depending on what I'm feeling like at the time as to which I read. Right, we recommence. I have double checked my memory of the stitch, which is in fact as I thought it was. I've also tidied the back of my canvas work a little. These blended threads and a different one in every row, and trying to keep the Bargello pattern going does produce a certain interesting difficulty at times, but we'll see how we go. And it is indeed, the stitch I was looking for is indeed, as I remembered, a condensed version of Scotch stitch. I just have to remember to make my Scotch stitches the same size as each other, lest I confuse myself totally. So while that challenge continues, I have a challenge for you. It has occurred to me recently that I know very few novels or works of fiction of any sort in which embroidery or needlework play a prominent and positive role. In fact, at the moment I can only think of two. One is Tracy Chevalier, A Single Thread, which is set, I think, in Bath, and the central character joins the Bath broiderers and learns to embroider. And it is a fictional story based around a real organisation with a real person at the centre of it. And the other one is called The Rose of Sebastopol, by Catherine McMahon. And the main protagonist in that is a skilled needlewoman, both dressmaking and embroidery of all sorts. And her needlework is both almost her superpower and her refuge, and she uses it to transform herself almost with each new challenge she faces. It's set in the Crimean War, and she actually goes out there looking for her cousin who's gone missing. Now, these two are the only ones I can think of, and there should be more, I would have thought, but I can't think of them. So I thought it would be interesting to see whether there were more, and whether anybody I know can add to my list. And if we get more than the two, I'll put them on a page on my website, so that if you feel like reading about someone else who embroiders, that will be the place to look. So, answers please, by whatever means you have available to you. I think my 6 strand will do fine for tent stitches. There is a Jill Patton Walsh detective story in which the key to the mystery is a quilt, but the person who made the quilt, I think, is dead, or at least not a central protagonist. So I'm reluctant to include that one, unless of course we decide that we have to include it or two in the whole wide world. I will ask my friends in the Georgette Heyer read-along. It was one of them who told me about the Rose of Sebastopol, so they may have encountered others. Now, it's clear that rendered like this fishy is not going to be very naturalistic, but that's not what I'm going to be aiming for. So that, I think, is a bonus rather than a disadvantage. He needs to be recognizable, but he needs to create the right sort of feel, I suppose. That, I suspect, is going to be an interesting challenge. I had forgotten, by the way, just how pleasant this single thread canvas is to work with. Years ago I used to prefer interlock canvas because it doesn't move, or not so much. But I am really enjoying working this canvas, which is something of a surprise. Now, That's all for this session. I hope you enjoyed following along. Happy stitching!